2003 got off to a brilliant start. In fact, the first 3 months were an exceptional period of time. I made a lot of headway with my family, and that's to say that I, from my perspective, had felt that I'd not got on so well with certain members, and maybe that was partly due to my own fault, and I put in a lot of work to make myself more acceptable, I suppose you could say. And from all the evidence in my diary, my journal, that went pretty well. I also returned to university, and this was for the second semester of my final year. In that regard, you know, I was living in Charles Morris Hall, as I had said, as I've said in a past sort of living and learning blog. And one of the things that was quite important was at the start of 2003, one of my friends called Martin Brown, who, again, I've spoken about before, his house, or wherever he was, fell through, and he had to move into halls, and he moved into the same halls. In fact, he lived almost directly underneath me in Charles Morris Hall. And that's quite important because A, he wasn't there at the start of the academic year, and B, I would seriously need him in the later part of the third semester. So this second semester he moved in, and I don't really believe in coincidences. I see I see this almost as divine intervention, really, as somebody in close proximity being moved into my close proximity to help me out in a time of trial, because I was about to go through the worst trial I've ever faced in my life so far. And he would prove absolutely invaluable to me during during what went on in the rest of the year. The other big thing was that I was starting I was halfway through, in fact, my dissertation, and I was getting to the point now where the research had been done and it was about writing it up. And several times in my diary I've got notes on how I'm procrastinating, doing anything but the the dissertation, because of course all the enjoyment of research and stuff was not quite as exciting when you actually had to finish writing it up. So that's what I was basically doing 10 years ago this time, and I'd become quite close to somebody on my course. And, you know, she was a bit strange. She was German, and she was a sort of, well, she would dress bizarrely. She was bizarre. I don't know if she was sort of a goth or if she was more of a punk. It was difficult to tell because she sort of changed her image every week. It was very strange. But you know, she used to come round a lot, and we used to watch gothic horror videos, and that was sort of partly my fault, because part of my dissertation was about violence through horror films. It was also true that we were both on the same course, and one of the modules of that course had been about the different types of horror movies, if you like, where the gothic horror, which begins with dealing with issues of the sublime, rather than being petrifying. You know, you don't find yourself scared in body about films such as these, but it may make you think about things that are existential and stuff like that. Bad move for me, because I tend to dwell on existentialism far too much, and I never come up with happy conclusions, I'm afraid. I don't know. I don't know what I think about that. Whether I think that that got me into an existential mood which would then seriously be a problem to me later on in the year, or more worryingly, whether it was a sort of gateway to methods of persuasion that, you know, psychological persuasion that would set me off in a difficult place. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I believe on you know, gateways, and I know that there's a lot of Christian teaching that says, you know, you shouldn't expose yourself to things that are dangerous in the evil sense of the word. And I have to say that I was just watching Gothic horror movies. I wasn't messing around with Ouija boards, okay? So it wasn't as bad as, you know, it sounds. And I would certainly say with something directly spiritual, no, you probably shouldn't be messing around with it, because exposure could endanger you. But I just wonder whether even that sort of level of because I'm quite an obsessive compulsive person, so we only had about 2 or 3 Gothic horror movies, and we were watching them over and over and over again, not after each other, but in January I'd watched the same movie about 4 or 5 times, so there's just a slight concern that that could have been one of the things that didn't help with some of the problems that were, you know, around later on. Now there'll be one more living and learning blog before the date where things start to get really interesting, and that will be sort of closer the time of my birthday. But until then, we'll leave this subject of the Annus Horribilis, because it didn't really kick off until the April time. So the first sort of quarter of the year was actually very good. Instead, I'm going to go through some of the things that you are used to in my weekly video blog, and that is the birthdays. We have a lot of birthdays this week. We've got Lyle Beerbon, JJ Ambrose, Helen Howe, TJ Dillashaw, Ryan Sturdy, James Head, Charles Darwint, Richie Whitson, Nick Ring, Brent Weedman, Brett Fitzgerald, and Andrus Palinkas. So all of those people, and there's quite a lot of them, are having birthdays. It seems to be the season for having birthdays. I don't know why, but last week we had about 20. This week we have about 20. Never mind. Each birthday is very important, particularly to the person whose birthday it is. And each birthday, I strongly believe, should be celebrated. So I hope they all have very good days. I also want to tell you about my belater supports for this week. They are Alexander Shlemenko, who is in a championship match, I believe, Marlon Sandro, who's on the upper card, and Clay Harvison, who is on the preliminary card. Look out for my UFC recap video. That is up. And in that you can find how I did on my predictions, and of course who my fighter of the card award goes to. And the only other thing to say is hopefully next week we'll be out and about. You know that I like to take you out and about to do blogs in different places, because it's more exciting for you to see, you know, something other than me just sitting here in my house. Why don't you see me sitting on a crag, or me sitting in a field, or something like that? Far more interesting. But I don't tend to do it this time of year because of course it's bad weather, and we could yet have snow. But assuming my sister is okay, she has had a series of migraines quite close together recently, which are not as good as they could be for, you know, saying that she'll be absolutely fine. But presuming that she is happy and healthy, me and my sister are going to go on a little bit of a road trip. We're going to the Midlands, to the Newark and Nottingham showground for a bird fair, a bird show. Imagine a car boot sale where you can buy and sell birds, livestock, buy and sell bird gear like, you know, cages and feeds and stuff like that. And then imagine a section that's devoted to birds in cages, which are being judged on what they look like, what they sound like, how they stand, what their form is. That's what we're going to have a look at. My sister's driving me down because she's got a car and a sat-nav, and in return I'm paying some contribution to the petrol. I'm paying for her entry as well as my own, and I hope that that might be a place that I can purchase some birds from. On that vein, I have not done the savings for this month, which is probably quite wise anyway. I just need to check finances before I do that, and I'm going to use that money hopefully for the bird show if she's well enough to take me. If not, obviously I'll put them into the savings, you know, the week after or whatever. So hopefully next week will be sort of more exciting, more like a video journal of my trip, the trip to my first bird show.